You ever feel those days where it's like, I think the dog ate my homework, but it's really just an excuse because you didn't do all your homework? It's been so many years. I'm actually to that point in life where I might want to go back to college because it just seems so like educational. Oh, that's what we're doing here. Education. Yes. FDA education. Oh, I hope it's a good show today. Hope you enjoy it. We're talking about De Novos. They've been around for 11 years in a publicly accessible way. They used to be around, but as a really niche thing, we're going to be talking all about that. Unfortunately, lots of MedTech layoffs continuing in the sector. And but we've got some actually a little bit of good news there. FDA is running a job fair, Into Being's hiring. So we've got opportunities too. So all is not lost. We're going to tell you all about it coming up next on MedTech Crossroads. And as always, you can reach us at contact@medtechcrossroads.com. Contact@medtechcrossroads.com. If you want to ask us about anything that's happened on the show, or any events that you have coming up that you'd like to tell us about, I just realized there was something that I was going to add to the list. We'll make sure we have it on YouTube, but in just a second, I'm going to have it up here on the iPad. This is actually really important. We have been doing a lot of aggregation for the show, and of course there it comes. Here comes the playlist. Yeah, I just wanted to show you this, and maybe we can bring it up on the iPad. We have some really cool playlists coming together. It's a little bit hard to see here, but one of these is de-risking medical device development. That's one I've been referring people to a lot when they come and say, hey, how do I think about this? Also this one, how do I get a 510K series? Also another one that has been very popular. Now both playlists on the YouTube page. So if you go to youtube.com/@IntoBeingLLC, you will find all the live streams, all 147 videos. But here are some specific ones that have been very useful to people, so we're putting those front and center. And as always, it's all in there. Really been enjoying the feedback on those, and people have been enjoying those. So just a little bit there on the show. We'll go back to the PowerPoint here. Contact@medtechcrossroads.com. Upcoming events coming up next here on the show. And these are brought to you from various sources, not least of which MichBio, MEDC, Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, Ann Arbor Spark, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Project MedTech. We gather these wherever we can find them, trying to just remind everyone what's happening in the ecosystem. And it's more than halfway over, but there is still a PMA Submissions Workshop happening May 23rd through May 25th. So if you're one of those rare companies that needs to do a PMA, there's still time to learn about it. Right from AdvaMed, scan the QR code or go to the YouTube page and you will find that for this episode. The BioConnections Networking Mixer, May 24th, Thornapple Brewing in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 5 p.m. That's a collaboration between MichBio and MyDevice, the West Michigan Device Consortium. And so that will be happening May 24th at Thornapple Brewing. May 23rd through 24th, MGCS, the Midwest Growth Capital Symposium. I just found out that Dave Brophy is having his retirement party in early June. He was one of the founders of this amazing event, and it continues at Ross Business School this year. May 23rd and May 24th. Look forward to seeing you there. Now, if there is bad news in the MedTech sector when it comes to jobs, there is some good news. FDA is hiring May 23rd through 25th, a virtual hiring event. That's a bunch of divisions at FDA, CDRH included, if you would like to find out what opportunities are available for scientists and engineers at FDA. And then the two confusingly named conferences, the Regulatory Education for Industry Conference, that is June 5th through 9th. This one does give credit for RAPS certifications. The REDI conference, REDI conference, and be ready for the same dates, the RESI conference, June 5th through 7th, Redefining Early Stage Investments. The links to those are in the YouTube page. But one, if you're into startups and investment, the RESI conference is where you want to go. And if you're trying to learn about regulatory issues with FDA, the REDI conference is where you want to go. Also, FDA is running a regulatory science forum June 13th through 14th, advancing regulatory science through innovation. This is probably mostly Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories. They have a whole bunch of tracks. We talked about them a little bit last week. But if you want to see how FDA is thinking about a whole bunch of different topics, this would be a decent place to go. Let me see if I can pull those topics up here really quick. I apologize I didn't have those right up when we were talking earlier. Yeah, here they are. The FDA's chief scientist is going to make opening remarks, then improving clinical and post-market evaluation. So that's all going to be about like IDEs and post-market surveillance. There's going to be a session on patients and consumers, a session on advancing products based on novel technologies. So that'll be breakthrough and safer program. Food and cosmetic safety, big data tools, a session on products development and manufacturing, a session on medical countermeasures, infectious disease and pathogen reduction technologies, and a session on substance abuse, misuse, and addiction. So that's the whole opioid crisis issue. But that's the FDA Science Forum, June 13th through 14th of this month. And Project MedTech wanted us to let you know that coming up on August 30th in Cleveland, Ohio, Midwest Showcase. A lot of familiar names there. Hope to see you in person at that. And then finally, the 2023 Michigan Life Sciences Showcase got moved back to September. MichBio was really busy in April and May trying to get some things out and did a great job at that. But I think that then pushed back the Life Sciences Showcase to September 18th. I know they've got drugs, devices, cannabis, other, all these life science related things. And that'll be September 18th in Lansing, Michigan. Well, that's about it for the events. We're going to talk about the news next. So on the news, wow, this is an interesting one. When we're working with clients at Into Being, IP always comes up, intellectual property. And you've heard the term picket fence before. Now, I'm not an IP lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but we've done a lot of work with companies who work with their IP attorneys to develop IP, and so we get to see it from a first-hand view. And of course, when we encounter at Into Being a client who finds themselves in a cool niche, it's so exciting because you can develop things and you can go to the IP attorney and you can say, hey, we'd like to file this, and they do a patentability search or a freedom to operate search, and you feel pretty good and you can do some cool stuff and you can get some IP around it. Not so in many domains. The more time passes, it seems like the more domains get crowded. You find yourself in a place where you just can barely generate IP, and it's on this nuance. It's something not very fundamental to the product. You can't reinvent the tongue depressor. You can only reinvent a better tongue depressor. And so you try to file on those nuances. Well, that's a challenge when you're working with small startups or mid-sized companies in niches that are of interest and are going to provide some good benefit to industry. Take it all the way to the top. Take it all the way to a company like, say Apple. Then life gets really interesting. I want to give full credit here to MedTech Dive. We are looking at some of their content here. And this is a writer that I know we've seen before, Elise Reuter here. So I just want to highlight a few things out of her article. The International Trade Commission to review ruling that Apple violated Masimo's patents. it's really interesting to see what she's noted has come out of this, right? So Apple, you've got the smartwatch, but Masimo and others, they've made pulse oximeters for years. They're the medical, market of these things. And so Apple says, hey, we've got this device and we're going to be able to monitor health. Great, but there's people with patents and devices in the space, just not in the sort of health wearable space necessarily. And so this all comes to a head, full international collision of technology leaders. And so ITC is examining this. I do want to call your attention to just a few things. The ITC did find earlier this year that Apple had violated ECG patents from AliveCor. So that's become a little bit of a problem for Apple. They're not enforcing the ban, though. The commission held off from enforcing the ban. So that means Apple can still sell their product right now. With Masimo, they ruled that Apple had infringed on one patent, okay, but not on 4 others. And they're getting down into the weeds here. They're actually looking at when people developed things to find out whether this is infringing and stuff like that. But this is it's interesting to see with intellectual property. It's always an issue. It's always something to be thinking about. And into being, we think about spinning a plate, right? Spinning a plate, you're balancing a plate on your finger, and it's spinning, and there's sort of 4 axes that it could fall off your finger. And one of those is the intellectual property landscape. One of those is the regulatory aspect. One of those is the technological aspect, and another one of those is the market aspect. And how you claim what your device does just balances at the very center of all of that and affects all of those directions. So here's a place where everything made sense. Apple's out there selling its smartwatch, but there are people in that market, and they weren't too happy about it. So we'll see what comes with Masimo and Apple. In the worst kind of a case, Apple could be banned from selling their device, which is kind of almost unthinkable because we're so used to seeing Apple Watches everywhere, at least in the U.S. So we'll see. Keep you up to date on that. That's from MedTech Dive, and Elise Reuter there from that article that we're commenting on. Another MedTech Dive article, we're going to share a few of these today. Cook Medical, just the latest set of layoffs after a significant change to the operating environment. They say that they are not laying off their manufacturing employees, but they're still laying off 4% of their workforce. So pretty big layoffs following those at Philips, Baxter, Illumina, J&J, thousands of positions gone. Cook had about 11,000 employees, and they're getting rid of about 500. So we're still seeing this sort of post-COVID righting of the MedTech industry. People are definitely backing off, tightening the belt. Not so here at Into Being. We actually, I wanted to show you this. We have a job posting up that we want to tell you about. And if you go to MichBio.org, you can find that posting using our friends at MichBio there for this job posting. Also our friends at Ann Arbor Spark. But if you go to the BioConnections tab on the MichBio webpage, and you go to the Career Center, all you got to do is scroll down here to view available jobs. And right at the top there, Into Being Senior Software Engineer. We are looking for the right person. The right person is somebody who can do architecture. This is probably someone relatively mature in their career who knows how to architect software. Something that we do here at Into Being, but we need more of it. And we are looking forward to hearing from anybody you know who's interested in that position. Well, now for the main event, De Novo classification requests. Sometimes we call them De Novo clearances, but that's not quite correct. Way back in the day, there was this thing that happened that if you got told in your 510K that you were not substantially equivalent to a predicate device, you had access to this thing called a De Novo. And really, there were only two options, right? Either you're substantially equivalent to a predicate device, or you're a pre-market authorization, pre-market approval. Well, that's a pretty big jump, going from substantial equivalence to a gigantic process. And industry said, hey, isn't there a way that we can get a little bit in between? Isn't there something in the middle? And FDA had the De Novo process, but you had to get said no to for a 510K in order to have access to that De Novo process. And then something happened on July 9th of 2012. FDA allowed a sponsor to submit a De Novo classification request to the FDA without first being required to submit a 510K. There's a little typo on FDA's webpage there if you're astute. Tell them about that. What does this mean? Well, right, FDA has taken all these medical devices and they've divvied them up into regulation numbers and product codes. So if you can find a regulation number and a product code that covers the intended use of what you're trying to do, and as long as the technological characteristics are at least similar enough that they don't raise new questions of safety or efficacy, then you might be eligible for a 510K. Oh, one thing. As long as you can find a predicate device. As long as you can find a device to compare your device to, that's a reasonable comparison. But what if you can't find an intended use that's really the same? What if you can't find a predicate that's suitable for comparison? Well, traditionally, like we said, the answer was PMA, pre-market approval, huge process. But a De Novo allows a reclassification down into a lower class of something that should have been a class 3 by all rights. Now, of course, it shouldn't have been, is what we're saying, because it's not high risk. So you take a lower risk device that doesn't have a predicate, doesn't have an established intended use, and you allow it to be reclassified. That's why it's called a De Novo classification. And so now there are two options for De Novo classification for novel devices of low to moderate risk. One, still, if you get a not substantially equivalent determination in response to a 510K, within 30 days of receipt, you can submit a De Novo request to FDA to ask for the device to be put into Class 1 or Class 2. Cool. Option 2, a person who determines that there's no legally marketed device upon which to base a determination of substantial equivalence, you can also do that to get it placed into Class 1 or Class 2 without first submitting a 510K. Great. That's awesome. And then once a device is De Novo, it can become a predicate for a future 510K submission. So people often ask, and we've had this happen in projects before, where you're going along and someone will get a De Novo, and either you become a predicate for your competitors or your competitors become a predicate for you. And sometimes the landscape changes midstream based on that. Note here that since 2010, FDA has been releasing summary documents, and this is going to be our focus today. Summary documents for devices classified through the De Novo process. And there's a whole bunch of them now. You'll notice that more recent De Novos just have classification orders. Let's take a look at this. Here's a classification order for Swing Therapeutics. They made a computerized behavioral therapy device for the treatment of fibromyalgia symptoms. And it got reclassified into Class 2, so it didn't need a PMA. They assigned a product code for it, QWI. And they decided that the device should be classified into Class 2. So, great. Congratulations, Swing Therapeutics. They have down here the mitigation measures. So if you're used to 510K summaries, you're not used to seeing this kind of thing. Mitigation measures that are in place based on certain risks. And then special controls. You recall that oftentimes 510Ks have special controls associated with them. And so now if we're going to take something and reclassify into Class 2 and make it a potential predicate for something else for a 510K, were there special controls? Yeah, they get defined as part of the De Novo classification. So here for this swing device, if you want to come along after the fact and make a claim of substantial equivalence to this device, you're going to need to evaluate the improvement in the symptoms of fibromyalgia, evaluate relevant adverse events. Physician and patient labeling has to include the following. It's not a long list in this case, but it is kind of interesting. If you get that De Novo, you're part of defining what the special controls are. So that actually gives you a little bit of power when you get that De Novo. You're like, well, why did I make a predicate for my competitor? That doesn't seem very good. Why do I have to become their pathway? Well, there's a bright side. You get to help define the special controls along with FDA. And so then your competitors have to jump through those special controls. In this case, they don't look terribly daunting, but in others, they certainly can be. So De Novos are submitted very much like 510Ks are. We won't belabor the submission process. Note that eStar and the CDRH Customer Collaboration Portal are what are being used for this now. I believe we said the portal is necessary as of October this year. So the days of running to FedEx with a thumb drive are quickly coming to a close. It was a great tradition. There would always be a picture that went out internally at our company whenever a new FDA submission went to FedEx. I guess it's not going to be, we're not going to have pictures of FedEx boxes anymore, Steve, going around the office. This is the end of an era.
I mean, what are we going to do now? Take pictures of an email? That's boring.
Yeah, it's like I'm looking at the webpage. I don't get a picture of it, right? Maybe we just get a picture of a FedEx box and we could sort of posterize it and stick it in one of the conference rooms just as a memorialization of the end of an era.
It's just the stock picture of the FedEx box at this point. We just reuse it.
Yeah, or we could really go extreme and get the front end of a defunct FedEx truck and make in the break room or something. We could just have it coming through the wall, like hey, why aren't you still? I'm sorry, we're going way off track here. But that is a new way to do things, certainly through the customer collaboration portal with FDA. So what of these De Novo summaries? We looked at this page right here. Going to go back. Sorry, just trying to find the page here. This was the one we were on. The classification orders come out first, and then it takes a while for the decision summary to come out. And it's the decision summaries that have some really interesting information. So why are we looking at this? Well, because we're asking the question, what sorts of new things is FDA clearing, right? If you're not just getting a 510K, not just being a Me Too, and you're not making the next heart-lung machine, what are these novel devices that don't warrant substantial equivalence to a predicate device, don't warrant a PMA, but they're so interesting and new that they warrant a De Novo? In other words, where are people really innovating devices that truly are not like what has come before? You can't even argue that they're like what has come before. We're going to look at 3 of these, and we might even have time to look at more. So let's go to these first ones here. The first one is the De Novo for EaseVRx. This is billed as the first virtual reality behavioral therapy device for pain relief. Okay, this isn't just mental conditioning for mental health or something. This has actually been studied for pain relief, specifically for the lower back. And as somebody who years ago really struggled with lower back pain, I'm very sympathetic to that situation. So here, the brief description: therapy is administered via a virtual reality display headset, which utilizes a software program containing the behavioral therapy. Okay, we can actually show you a picture of this, I believe. Here's a picture of the device, maybe not the greatest. There's the applied VR headset. If you note that it's a little bit taller than most, that's because the headset actually stops right down here at nose level, just like every other VR headset. This bottom part is actually a breath redirector. When you breathe, I'm going to do it now, right? When you breathe, it catches the sound of that breath. I believe that might have to do with indicating stress or other things, and redirects that sound up in a microphone that's placed up in the facial area. So they've actually changed the headset somewhat to listen to your breath. It's been reclassified into Class 2, product code QRA, and they're looking at chronic lower back pain, defined as moderate to severe pain lasting longer than 3 months. It's prescription use only, but it is home use. Oh, there's that breath shield. I knew we were going to get a picture of it there somewhere. So you breathe into it. As you're breathing, rather, it redirects the sound upwards to amplify it for the microphone. Oh, they got their technical specifications. It's an 8-week treatment program. They've got categories of experiences: relaxation, education, mindful escapes, pain distraction, and dynamic breathing. Now, for those of you developing devices, I think you're going to find this really fascinating. As far as biocompatibility goes, they are noting that it is a duration of contact less than 24 hours. These are common categories. They say that the device is subject to biocompatibility evaluation. And you could do cytotox, sensitization, intracutaneous reactivity. Those of you involved in medical device development are going, oh, I've never seen those before. Just every single project I've ever done. But look at this. However, considering that these materials have a history of safe use in medical devices, the total cumulative contact duration is low, and that the manufacturing process complies with these parts of the quality system regulation, they didn't provide test data for it, and FDA accepted it. Whether you're doing a de novo or not, this is really interesting information, because oftentimes you're wondering, well, how much is FDA going to accept on the basis of saying this is a common material? And even though they've got quite a few materials in this headset, contacting the face, now it's not mucous membranes, it's not blood contacting, right? It's just contacting the face. Nevertheless, they succeeded at getting FDA to acknowledge that they didn't need to evaluate the biocompatibility data any further. It won't come as a surprise that it was tested to IEC 60601, some of that family of standards. They spent some time battery testing, and the software has a minor level of concern. They spent some time in a double-blinded, placebo-controlled, single-cohort clinical trial, and I'm going to open up that clinical trial separately, actually, and we'll take a look at it. But they did have some pretty cool changes. You can see it here. The thing I really want to show you is the graph. The graph does raise some questions in my mind. And of course, the ultimate litmus test for a device is whether it sells, right? Are people finding benefit to it? But just at a basic level, this particular test found, percent reduction from pre-treatment to end of treatment for EaseVRx and the sham groups. It's interesting to note that in every single case, there was a reduction in the experienced pain. even if it was the sham. So just doing something has an effect. And in some cases has as much as almost a 40% effect. Now I'm going to note a difference here. In this particular clearance, they said that sleep interference was actually improved with the device. You're going to see that that wasn't true in what may have been a different study with the same device. But before we go to those clinical things, mitigations, special controls, not a long list of special controls. And of course, importantly, the benefit-risk determination, something that companies often overlook. You have to make a benefit-risk conclusion that the use of the device and the benefit of the use of the device outweighs its risks. So let's take a look at this PubMed study, the 8-week self-administered at-home behavioral skills-based virtual reality program for chronic low back pain, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial conducted during COVID-19. I almost did that in one breath. And this is with the same device. 179 adults. What was very fascinating to me about this is they showed improvements. The one that in this trial didn't show improvement, let's see if we can find it here. Should have marked this. Was the sleep improvement, interestingly enough. Oh, we're not finding it here. Maybe it was in the other article. We'll come to it here. These graphics, though, were interesting. And I think it's important to realize it's not that the sham shown in blue here didn't do anything. It did. There's definitely an effect. Maybe it's just time passing. Maybe it's the fact that you're just doing something about your pain. Did result in a perceived reduction in pain intensity. Now, it didn't go as low as it did with the EaseVRx treatment. But it is the case that, after 56 days, the sham has you down to about roughly where you were after a week with the other treatment. So I think what we're saying here, and I'm not a clinician, but I think what we're saying here is that EaseVRx believes they are demonstrating an acceleration of recovery from lower back pain, and that seems to be what they're going for. Here was that information. This is what I wanted to show you. Mean pain intensity improvement was 30.3% for those in the EaseVRx group and 15.8% in the sham VR group, so sort of an overall measurement. Mean improvement for pain interference with activity was, I think, a little bit better. Mean improvement in pain interference with mood, a little bit lower, but still noticeable. This is the one that caught my eye. Mean improvement for pain interference with sleep was basically identical. It didn't seem to affect things relative to sleep. Now, that may come as a disappointment to many who, if the pain is what's keeping you from sleeping, that may be your biggest desire is to have it help with that. But nevertheless, you're seeing the same kind of mid-30s for stress, mood, and activity, as well as a mean overall. Not a lot that said that it improved physical function. And ironically, inverted for sleep disturbance, but probably not statistically significant. We're not being we that here, but we might be able to guess at that. But the promise here is at-home, self-administered virtual reality pain care, and I'm sure that there are those who, for this could be a really, really cool thing. What we don't know yet, how's it working? I did some searching to try to find out how is this device being received. And mostly what you find is interesting news articles that say, at-home VR pain care. Not a lot saying whether it's good or not, whether people are liking it, whether they're buying it. The plan was for the company to roll out the launch in 2023. So while FDA has said, yes, we believe that this does improve the situation, Hasn't made it as a product yet. The jury's still out on that. We'll find out. Here's another one. Now this one, I don't know. Maybe it's just because we've worked on endoscopes. Steve, you might get to do some work on endoscopes. It's a fascinating space, and there's a lot of cool things that you can do. But this is an endoscopic light projecting measuring device for mucosal surfaces. I thought this was really cool just from a technological standpoint. It's been reclassified into Class 2, product code QTH. It's called the AccuMeasure system. And it's an accessory used with an endoscope. Look how this works. This is kind of cool. It's a laser that goes inside of the endoscope. And it does really one thing and one thing only. It projects a laser line. You can get these for your home improvement projects, and now you can get them for your GI tract. It projects a laser line that has been calibrated for use with the imaging system on the endoscope so that the laser has known parameters. And when you take a picture of that laser line as it traverses some object, a polyp, or whatever else on the mucosal membrane, you can measure it just from that picture. Isn't that cool? It's a really neat idea. I like that one. Now, it actually was not, here, they did biocompatibility, so no worries there. Which is interesting because it's the probe itself that contacts the mucosal membrane. The AccuMeasure processing unit is not patient contacting. So they did and had received the biocompatibility testing for the probe itself. Electromagnetic compatibility, software, and cybersecurity all considered here. No big surprise. But what was interesting about this was that and there's a lot of stuff blanked out on this document that they don't want you to see directly. Somewhere down here, I'm going to find it. They made the benefit risk determination on the probable benefits of the device. So this is interesting. People often say, I'm going to have to do a clinical trial, right? Well, here's a De Novo. It did have a clinical study, but it wasn't the outcome that was the subject of the study. So they did the study, they looked at risk data, they looked at safety data. There was some issue getting clear images, but it didn't stop them from getting the device cleared. But they didn't prove the benefit of the device in their clinical trial. Isn't that interesting? So you think to yourself, De Novo, I'm going to need clinical data. Yeah, probably. De Novo, clinical data, doesn't prove anything. Got clearance. How did that happen? Well, it might be because objects on a benchtop, you can believe that they're similar to objects inside a body. You can image them and you can measure them carefully. It's not that they're not studying this further. Here is a clinicaltrials.gov study using the AccuMeasure device. The main objective here, they say, is to compare the precision of polyp size measurements by AccuMeasure to biopsy forceps-assisted measurement. Also assessing learning curve and time needed for the measurement. But very much of a continuing study. I remember being in a session where the head of CDRH said, every device we clear to the market is an investigational device. Everything that we clear cannot be fully proven in every single way that you could ever hope for. And so here's an interesting example of something that was proven on the benchtop, proved safe and risk-free enough to use in a clinical trial, but the studies continue to demonstrate the efficacy of the device, even after clearance. And finally, the CavaClear laser sheath. This is the last one we'll take a look at. This is an inferior vena cava filter retrieval catheter. Somebody is going to be happy that this device got developed, because apparently IVC filters don't always get detached and removed like they should. Oh, I hate to think about it, but nevertheless, reclassified into Class 2, product code QRJ, CavaClear laser sheath, cleared by FDA. There's a picture of it. It transmits ultraviolet energy, pulsed, from a laser generator to the tissue, ablates a tiny amount of the tissue through photochemical, photothermal, and photomechanical interaction, vaporizes that tissue overgrowth, and allows removal of the filter. That's nice to not have something stuck inside of you that's not supposed to be there anymore. Here's a picture of it from Philips. The lasers appear to be surrounding there it is, nice picture of that. We'll zoom in. Laser fibers surrounding an open bore there. And let's see if this video will run. I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll give it a try and see what happens.
Introducing the first and only FDA-cleared device designed for advanced IVC filter removal, Philips CavaClear. IVC filters have been proven effective at helping to prevent pulmonary embolism. However, research has shown that IVC filters may have long-term complications. The FDA recommends that physicians consider removing retrievable IVC filters as soon as they are no longer indicated. Reported adverse events with prolonged filter dwell times can include filter fracture, filter migration, filter embolization and perforation, and retrieval failure can leave patients at risk for future filter-related complications or the need for open surgery. CavaClear transmits ultraviolet energy from a Philips excimer laser. The state-of-the-art cool laser sheath delivers 80 pulses per second of energy. The forward penetration depth is less than the width of a human hair. CavaClear is designed to safely and predictably ablate scar tissue 360 degrees around an embedded IVC filter, making removal precise and possible within seconds of laser activation. The FDA has designated CavaClear a breakthrough device. CavaClear promotes safety, improves efficiency, and gives you control.
So that's how they're removing these IVC filters. So it's kind of neat. It's neat to see that they can get them out again, because it sounds like something you don't want to leave in there. All the types of things you would expect. I mean, this is externally communicating direct contact with circulating blood, so sterility and biocompatibility. Electromagnetic compatibility, not there because it's isolated from the laser. There's no electronics in it. But that doesn't exempt you from 60601, so there's a lot of 60601 related standard families that are applied there. No software in it. Did a lot of bench testing for it. A lot of human factors testing, package testing, animal testing. That's a pretty invasive process. And they did a safety study on that as well as a study with outcomes, high procedural technical success rates. Looks like they did a couple hundred patients, centered around about 52 years old. I guess that's about where these things can start to happen. So a lot of results there from those trials. We won't belabor those, but these are examples. These three things we've talked about, these are examples of the kinds of devices that are getting cleared under De Novo classification requests. There's a huge list here. I think 298 entries. I believe that's since, I want to say 2010 is what we read earlier. The decision summaries will be under the slightly older ones. The newer ones will only have the classification orders. And not every decision summary has been published. I know there's a lot of you out there waiting for decision summaries on products that you'd really like to know about. And FDA gets around to them when they get around to them, so you'll see those when they come. So many here. It would be fun to do some more of this in the future. I think we'll probably come back to this list. Probably won't do more than 2 or 3 at a time, but at some point in the future, I'm sure we'll be back looking at these De Novo summaries to learn more about what is novel that's getting cleared by FDA. So cool. And what you saw in each of those is something that wouldn't have made it through a predicate device process because there's something so new and so novel about it. I mean, this last one, you can't clear an IVC filter until the IVC filter exists, and then you got to get pretty familiar with them before you can build a device to pull them out again. And so it makes sense how that ended up as a De Novo. Yeah, and we will talk more about De Novos and how you get them and everything else in future shows. But for now, that brings us to the end of our content for today. I'm just going to check and see if we have any questions either on Zoom or on YouTube. Give us just a second to check on that. A lot of folks there. It's good to see folks tuning in. So if anyone wants to raise a hand, you're welcome to ask a question or make a comment. If you have events coming up that you want us to know about, you're more than welcome to do so. We'll give about 30 seconds for that. And then we will shut it down for the day momentarily. And not seeing any questions or comments today. Steve, what do you think our last word today should be? We always just say the same thing, and I feel like we got to mix it up a little bit.
I don't know. Maybe just suggest people have a good weekend here. It looks like it's going to be at least decent-ish here in Michigan.
Yeah.
A little rain this evening, but other than that, it looks like a good weekend.
That's what we should do. We should end these shows with a weather forecast. There you go. Hot from the press. Thank you, Steve, and thank you all for being here. We'll see you next week.